Margate. Hello, Cokesbury family. It's Monday Chapel time. Yesterday we talked about the candor of courage, the importance of having this value of openness, of direct and compassionate communication, of gentleness to build healthy relationships at home, at work, in school, in church, anywhere we go. So please check it out. Remember when I was in high school, I was senior in high school. Something unusual happened that year in my school. So they merged two classes together. And the way that school worked was basically like this. Class number 1, the best students, the best ones. Class number 2, not great students, and those who had failed. I spent my whole life in that school. And 80% of my classmates were with me since we were 5 years old. Okay, so what happened? We're having issues. Because in Brazil, to go to college, you actually go through exams, and the best grades get a spot in college. Free college and paid ones, it doesn't matter. So some of us were really focused on going to college, others not so much. So we were having issues. So the school decided to take us to spend a whole day doing teamwork exercises. And I remember one specifically because that was important to me, actually became a value. Basically, they got us in groups of 3, and each one of us had to say something about the other person. So we had to highlight 3 characteristics of that person. And we could not respond to it. Okay? So basically, I had 2 friends highlighting 3 and 3, 6 characteristics of myself. Okay? So it was not as comfortable as I thought it would be. But it was super helpful. Why? I was one of the leaders of that class since ever. I always was consulted. I was always asked by the principal what I thought about this or that. How could I help the school and the class to come together in some project? And I did that. But what I learned that day is that sometimes when I was being helpful, or in my head, I was being helpful to the whole class and my friends, I was not. They were receiving whatever message I had as sometimes something, I don't know, show off, not show off, that's not what they said. Not critical as well. But, well, let's see, I thought about not mentioning. They said that it was stubborn. Okay, they said that sometimes I wanted to impose my ideas. And I mean, if I'm giving directions to some project, I'm not trying to impose my ideas. I'm trying to guide. But it was coming across as imposing ideas, imposing my will. So what was the lesson that I learned that day? The way I see myself often does not match the way people see myself. And I believe we all can say, yes, I know. We all know. But we continue to act the way we want without thinking much about the consequences of our actions and words to someone else. And not accusing anyone, it's just facts. You know what the psychiatrists say? Problem number 1 in relationships: lack of communication. And they use the word lack of effective communication. And I like to say lack of helpful communication. What I learned that day is that if you become open to listen to each other, if we learn how to be open to what someone else can have to say, it actually can be really helpful, and we can improve considerably our relationship, and we can work better as a team, and we can build community, we can create things with ease. So, if you do, like me, want to improve your family relationships, your work experience, and even the church experience, we all need to improve our communication skills. And that's why today the title of the sermon is The Candor of Courage. Because this is an important skill that I believe we must have if we want to have healthy relationships and if we want to be a transformative community as well. So the definition of candor that I'll offer to you is: candor is the ability to be open, honest, direct, or frank in speech and conversation. What candor is not? To say what I believe is true to that person who really needs to hear it. We all have done that at some point, right? Candor is not to say the truth regardless of the consequences. Why? Because words matter. Because words hurt. And being wise, or trying to be wise in the way we present our ideas and our words, is important if we want to build something. If we want to divide and tear apart, doesn't matter. You don't need to worry about being candor. But if you want to build community, if you want to build family structure, if you want to build healthy relationships in any level, candor is essential. And again, candor is the ability to be open, honest, direct, frank in speech and in conversation. So I really believe that candor communication is helpful, because when we speak with candor, we're seeking to build connection. If I just want to say something because I believe it, someone else has to hear it, I'm putting myself in a position that makes me more, higher, more important, more knowledgeable, more anything than the other person. And that's not God-like. What we learn from Scripture is that we need to submit ourselves to each other. That's the Christian way to do. So every time we try to be more than someone else, sorry to say, we're missing the target. And what missing the target means is the basic definition of sin. Candor communication builds bridges. Candor communication is not demanding or judgmental. So it takes courage to use candor and compassionate communication, because in the process we make ourselves vulnerable. We don't like to be vulnerable to each other. One other thing that I've done soon, probably after the first service here in July, I asked a few folks to meet with me every Tuesday morning. So we do our meeting to plan this worship service, the next worship service, but also to give feedback about the last ones. And the bottom line was, the first thing I said to them is like, this should be a safe space so we can share our thoughts and say, this didn't work, that did work, that's how I felt about this, and then we try to build something. But if in that space it's not a safe space, if in that space we don't use candor communication and open communication, if we are not open for honest feedback, it's just going to hurt ourselves. It's not going to be helpful at all. Right? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So we are aiming to build things. And being honest is essential. Sometimes we don't want to be honest because we don't want to hurt anybody else's feelings. So what I'm trying to say here, folks, is that it's a work. It takes some courage. But finding a way to tell the truth to someone else is challenging, but it can be really helpful. As long as we are open to hear each other. When we close that window, don't try it. It's not going to work. Okay? It's not going to work. Okay, so we see in this passage 3 persons, right? We have Simon inviting Jesus to a dinner to honor Jesus. So we have Jesus, Simon, and we have this woman. So apparently, as I mentioned before, Simon is inviting dinner because he's open to build a friendship with Jesus. He's open to honor Jesus. But he didn't greet with kiss, he didn't offer water or oil. And by failing these values, he was communicating that he didn't want to honor Jesus, and he didn't want to be friends with Jesus. So he was not being candid. He was not being honest. And even by thinking what he thought, the judgmental phrases he had in his mind, he was not brave enough. He didn't have the courage to express out loud. He was not being candid. Because when we want to be candid, and when we have the courage, we'll speak out in a gentle way. The woman, by contrast, the way she cried, the way she was at Jesus' feet, she was being abundantly honest about her condition. He understood how sinful she was and how holy Jesus was. And by doing all that she did, she was expressing open, frankly, that she repented. She was just sorry about many, many things in her life. It's funny because she was being candid without saying a word. And now Jesus, we see Jesus being candid. But in this passage, Jesus invites Simon to a conversation. Jesus begins saying, Simon, I have something to say to you. And then Simon approaches. Okay, go ahead. So they kind of move close to each other. And Jesus says a story, 2 persons owed money. One owed 50 coins. The other one owed 500. And then they were both forgiven. Their debts were forgiven. Which one do you think was more grateful? Oh, the one that owed 500. I agree. So candor communication tries to find points of connection. Again, become closer to each other. And then Jesus goes like, and then Jesus highlights the differences and the fails and the mistakes. And in the process, he removes the focus from the sinfulness of that woman and brings the main subject to the table. And the main subject in that meeting was, you invited me here. And apparently, you thought you could embarrass me. Because again, we need to understand this. that was not like, Jesus, come to my house to have dinner. It was a banquet, an event like that. That's why the woman heard about it. That important Pharisee in the city was having a banquet to receive Jesus. So he had more Pharisees, he had his friends, and he had the whole community. That was a normal gathering. Okay, let's pretend this is Simon's house. Okay, this would be the dinner area for the guests, and the patio would receive people from the village. And all of them witnessed Jesus getting to that house, not receiving water, not receiving a kiss, and not receiving oil. And Jesus comes closer to him, finds agreement, and again teaches a lesson that to this day we talk about in many different ways. And the whole point of the teaching moment was, I am the Son of God who forgives sins. So it was uncomfortable for Simon. But Jesus was candid in the way he presented things. So it takes courage to speak the truth, and it takes greater courage to be candid as we do it. So I believe we all need to improve our communication skills if we want to improve our relationships. And healthy relationships require acceptance, and it's focused on common ground. We don't need to be the same. We don't need to behave the same. But we need to invest in those things that we have in common. Again, as a church, we need to behave as sons and daughters of God. So, my hope for today is that as we work, as we go home, as we go back to our families and to work, that we be reminded that we are called, all of us, to be builders. We are called to build the kingdom of God. And I hope we will hold on this important value that we are calling candor today. This important value of openness, of integrity, of honest communication. Honest and gentle communication. Helpful communication.